Doom, one of the most important video games of all time. It both defined the FPS genre and PC gaming as we know it, so it was bound to be successful. With how important and successful a game was, various console ports of Doom were released as a way of bringing the DOS FPS experience to the couch. You had Doom on just about any console that could run it. Super Nintendo, Sega 32X, Atari Jaguar, 3DO, PlayStation 1, Sega Saturn. They all had versions of Doom which mostly brought the PC experience to the consoles, usually with something to set it apart from the other ports. The 3DO version, CD soundtrack, the colored lighting in the PS1 and Saturn versions, the Switch version is a login simulator, and the 32X version being a good representation of the system. It sucks!
You're terrible.
So today we're going to be looking at Doom on one of my favorite consoles, the Nintendo 64. I wonder how this version is going to differ from DOS Doom. Well, looks like we're in for a treat. With all of that said, welcome to Doom 64. There are several ways of playing Doom 64, so I'm going to go over the options and list their pros and cons. Firstly, let's start with playing it on the console itself. I don't recommend playing it like this. For starters, you'll be running at a resolution of 240p and at a frame rate of around 30 FPS, with dips when things get intense. This combined with the Nintendo 64 controller makes playing the game on original hardware less than ideal. Emulation isn't much better either. Sure, you can now run the game at whatever resolution you see fit, but the frame rate is still stuck at around 30 FPS, while still being forced to use a controller. The best option for playing Doom 64 for the longest time was Doom 64 EX, a reverse-engineered port of Doom 64 that ran on modern operating systems. It ran the game at whatever resolution you wanted, in widescreen, at extremely high frame rates with mouse and keyboard support. There is just one major problem with it. Mouse support has been completely screwed over by Windows 10 updates, and the mouse won't even work for me without installing the Windows 10 fix. Even with this fix, I still get frequent mouse stuttering, and the only workarounds for this is to either play with a controller or switch operating systems. And as I'm recording footage for this review, this happens. It crashed. So until these issues have been sorted out, I'm going to be playing Doom 64 using Doom 64 Retribution, a recreation of Doom 64 and the GZDoom Sourceport. It has all the features that GZDoom has, like mouse and keyboard support, high resolutions and frame rates, even 3D audio if you turn HRTF on, and all you need to run it is a Freedoom Phase 2 WAD, which is completely free. I'll also be using the classic gameplay add-on for Retribution to make it as accurate to Doom 64 as possible. I'll have links to these down in the description box below if you're interested in giving it a go. Retribution also has a couple of extra features like extra levels, higher difficulties, and a story cutscene at the beginning. I Own Doom is about the equivalent to Hurt Me Plenty in difficulty, and I recommend playing on that for a first time playthrough, but for this playthrough I decided to play it on Watch Me Die difficulty. Now with all of that out of the way, let us dive into Doom 64. Doom 64 was released in 1997 by Midway in collaboration with id Software. Unlike the other console releases of Doom 64 is its own game with unique levels and ideas, so I'm going to go over what I like about this game. Let's start by talking about the maps, which are all fantastic for a couple of reasons. First is consistency. The Doom games usually have sections of them which are below the standards of the rest of the game. Doom had Thy Flesh Consumed, and Doom 2 had the city levels in the middle section. Doom 64 doesn't have a bad section to it, and is consistently good across the duration of the game, with the exception of the first secret level, which is just...
You're terrible.
And at least that level is optional. Secondly is the visual design of the levels. In Doom, lighting was limited to a set brightness, and maybe strobing to give a bit of atmosphere, but in Doom 64, Colored lighting is used to its fullest extent to give the levels an immersive feel. Some levels will even transform the landscape around you, which helps heighten the level of immersion. The music also does a fantastic job of portraying the sinister nature of these levels. It was done by Aubrey Hodges and are meant to be more ambient and atmospheric compared to Doom's music, which helps enforce the dark and sinister tone that the game is going for. These elements on top of the darker and more Quake-like art style really help Doom 64 stand out from Doom in a great way. But the levels wouldn't be fun to progress through if the combat wasn't any good. This is Doom after all. Firstly, let's start with the enemy roster. Zombiemen and shotgunners return from Doom 1 and 2 and pose the same threat as before. However, they both have similar looking sprites, meaning that you'll need to treat every zombieman like it's a potential shotgunner. Imps, Pinky Demons, and Cacodemons also return and are largely unchanged from their PC Doom counterparts. Spectres, however, now start out visible and only turn invisible once they become aware of the player. Hell Knights and Barons of Hell return as well and make up most of the combat in the later sections of the game. The Mancubus and Arachnotrons also return, however they don't pose as much of a threat as their PC Doom counterparts. I think they aren't as aggressive, but I'm not sure. Lost Souls are both easier and harder to deal with. Easier because they die faster, but harder because they are much more aggressive with their attacks and can melt you in seconds if you're not careful. This is made more apparent by the changes to Pain Elementals, which now spawn 2 Lost Souls at a time instead of 1. They are easily the most annoying enemies to deal with in the game, and 2 of them can make clearing out a room a complete nightmare. Lastly, the Cyber Demons make a return, and are the perfect challenge when they appear. Thankfully, the most annoying enemies of Doom 1 and 2 were left out of the game, so no Chain Gunners, Revenants, Archviles, or Spider Masterminds. Instead, Doom 64 introduces 2 new enemies. One of them is the Nightmare Imp, a translucent blue imp that shoots fireballs that move faster than the imp's fireballs, making them a real threat in some of the more cramped areas. The other enemy is the final boss, which I'll talk about later. The enemies are mostly unchanged from PC Doom, with a few changes making the combat feel more dynamic and less annoying overall. But the enemies wouldn't be fun to fight without a great lineup of weapons, which Doom 64 has. The entire lineup of Doom 2 weapons are here. So you get the pistol, the chainsaw, the shotgun, the super shotgun, the chain gun, the rocket launcher, the plasma rifle, and the BFG. The only notable changes to the weapons is that the shotgun and super shotgun don't have reloading animations due to cartridge limitations. Doom 64, however, introduces what is probably my favorite weapon in the entire series, the Unmaker. Now when you first get the weapon, it sucks, as it's essentially a slower firing version of the plasma rifle that fires lasers instead of plasma balls. But the Unmaker has the special trait of being upgradable. The secret levels in Doom 64 are home to 3 demon keys, each one upgrading the power of the Unmaker. 1 key gives the weapon a faster firing rate, 2 keys increases the firing rate more and adds a second laser, and 3 keys increases the firing rate again and adds a third laser. The fully upgraded Unmaker is the most powerful weapon in the game, and does so much damage that it puts the BFG to shame. It's also the best possible way of rewarding players for finding the secret levels. I've talked about most of the aspects of Doom 64, so now I'm going to talk about my 2 favorite levels in the game. The first level is the Dark Citadel, which is probably the biggest level in the entire game. It has a ton of memorable areas with some of the highest enemy counts in the game. It also has some excellent usage of ambient lighting to give the illusion that the outside is casting light rays. One of my favorite parts of the level is the Dark Haunted Library, as it both has a great atmosphere to it and facilitates fun zombieman gunfights. The music used in this level also helps complement the atmosphere perfectly. The level ends in a section that is lit by a central fire pit, and a fight with a couple of barons. A perfect ending to a great level. The other level is the last secret level, the Void. It has a visual design unlike anything else in the game, with a dark teal fog that envelops the level, and sections that are linked together by bridges and teleporters. It gives the level a dark and haunting atmosphere, which is helped by one of my favorite music tracks in the game. I also think it has one of the best endings of any of the levels in the game, as once you get the final demon key, all hell breaks loose and you have to make a rush for the exit before you're overwhelmed by lost souls. There are many more levels like these, but these are just the 2 levels that really stood out to me as above the rest and are worth playing Doom 64 just to experience. The game ends with you closing 3 demon portals using the demon keys that you found in the secret levels, before the final boss reveals herself, the Mother Demon, and she has a look that only a mother could love. Thankfully, the Unmaker makes quick work of her. You then get an ending cutscene which concludes the story, with Doom Guy staying in hell. Doom 64 is my favorite game in the Doom series, and any fan of Doom owes it to themselves to give this game a go. Ripping and tearing has never been better than this. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again soon.